Hey guys, it's Mariana and it's time for another monthly wrap-up. So today I'm going to be quickly, or as quickly as I can, telling you about everything that I've read and watched throughout November. I always say quickly telling you, but then these wrap-ups are never quick. They're always 10 minutes or more, so I'll do my best, but this is probably not going to be quick because I have a lot to talk about. And as always, there are timestamps in the info bar below, so if you want to skip around the video to a particular section, you can do so. Check out the info bar for timestamps and also for everything that I talk about in this video: links, reviews, titles, everything is listed down below. Starting with the books, and since I was finally out of my reading slump, I actually did some legitimate reading in November, and the first book that I finished was Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. I'm sure you've heard of it, but if you think you know the story of Frankenstein and you haven't read the book, you probably don't, because I thought I knew the story and I didn't. There's no such thing as a faithful movie adaptation of this novel. I really enjoyed this book. This is gothic science fiction, and I believe this is the first actual science fiction novel. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's definitely one of the first ones. This is so beautiful and heartbreaking and atmospheric, and the writing is absolutely stunning. I think this is a must-read classic. It is not long. Also, check out my awesome edition of it, and I think you should absolutely check it out if you have not read it already. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars, and like I said, I definitely highly recommend this. After that, I finally read The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo by Stieg Larsson, and I really wish this book wasn't renamed because the actual title translates into Men Who Hate Women, and it is such a more fitting title for this novel. And fun fact, this is actually the 3rd time I've attempted to read it. It was really difficult for me to get through the first couple of chapters for some reason. I had a lot of trouble getting into this book, but once I powered through it, I was really into it. I can say that I loved the writing, and that may have to do with the fact that it's a translated work and maybe in the original language it flows better, but for me it just didn't quite flow as well as I wanted it to, and there were a few parts where things just got way too descriptive, just really meticulous details that possibly didn't really need to be there. But overall, I really enjoyed the novel. I enjoyed the characters. The plot was fascinating, even though I have seen both the Swedish movie and the American version, and I still was fascinated by this book. There are so many twists and turns. The author had a lot to say when it comes to social commentary, and he leaves you with a lot to consider and a lot to think about, and you guys know how much I love when that happens. So I definitely enjoyed that aspect of the novel, but also in general, once I got past those first couple of chapters, I was definitely into it and I was very much engaged. I ended up giving it 4 out of 5 stars, mainly because of the writing, but I still, like I said, very much enjoyed it, and I have already started The Girl Who Played with Fire, and I am very much enjoying that as well. After that, I listened to The Ables by Jeremy Scott, and it was also narrated by Jeremy Scott, whom you may know from CinemaSins, and if you don't subscribe to CinemaSins, you need to, because that channel is awesome and hilarious. But anyways, of course I had to listen to the audiobook when the author was narrating it, and I really enjoyed the premise. I thought it was a very interesting take on superpowers because it is about kids with disabilities who have superpowers. The main character, Philip, has been blind since birth, and he gets placed in this special ed class in school for gifted children, and that's kind of the premise of it. And I thought it was just such a refreshing take on the superhero story, and it's definitely an underdog story, but at the same time it's a very typical underdog story. So this is kind of where the book didn't lose me necessarily, but I didn't love it as much as I wanted to love it. I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. I still really liked it, but the fact that it was kind of predictable and kind of a typical underdog story didn't really do much for me. And also, I can say that I was super attached to any of the characters. Even though I did like some of them, I never really felt a personal connection with any of them. So 3.5 out of 5 stars. If you're looking for a quick superhero story that has slightly of a different angle, then I would definitely check this out, and I definitely recommend the audiobook. The last book that I finished in November is Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo, and this is book 1 of the Grisha trilogy. A lot of you love this book and love this series. I did not love it as much as a lot of you did, but I still enjoyed reading it. And the problem that I had with Shadow and Bone is if you take away the setting of this novel, it is a very typical young adult fantasy that's centered around a young girl who is plain, but not really, because their plainness is described in having brown hair and being too skinny, because, you know, that's terrible. And she is this special snowflake who doesn't know that she's special. Basically, the majority of this book was pretty predictable for me because it is kind of a typical young adult fantasy novel, and it kind of surprises me that so many people love this series so much. Maybe it gets much better in book 2 and 3, but judging by this book, I would say this is pretty standard if you take away the setting, which the setting is a separate discussion on its own, which I'm not going to get into because I am from Eastern Europe, so some of these references in this book that are based on Russian culture are kind of silly to me because they are either completely wrong translations of actual words that exist, or they are misinterpretations of stuff. And there are a lot of things in here that the author kind of made up herself, like made up words, but a lot of this actually exists in real life, except for it means something different, which just really messed with my brain, and I don't understand why the author couldn't just come up with her own stuff if she was coming up with half of it. Anyways, like I said, I'm not going to get into this because I would be here for a while talking about all these references and things, but I did enjoy reading this. I know it kind of sounds like I hated it, but I did not. I enjoyed reading it. It's a fast-paced book. It is an engaging book. I really liked the magic system and the way the magic worked, the way everything was explained, and I did really like the villain because he actually acts like a villain, and he is surprisingly fleshed out, and he has actual motivations that make sense, so I understand him, and I hope he doesn't change. I ended up giving Shadow and Bone 3.5 out of 5 stars because I did have some problems with it, but in the end, I did like it, and I will be continuing with the series, and hopefully it gets more interesting for me. Moving on to comic books, I read 2 trade paperbacks in November, both of them by Scott Snyder, because I kind of have an obsession with his writing, apparently. The first one is Severed, which is a limited comic book series. There's only 7 issues and they're all collected in this volume. This is a horror comic book series, and it is about a 12-year-old boy named Jack who runs away from home to look for his biological father and runs into some interesting people, like this person breaking through the cover. It is an interesting comic book series, and I did enjoy reading it. I have to say, though, after reading some other things by Scott Snyder, I expected a little bit more from this. I didn't really connect with the characters. I thought it was interesting. I thought it actually reminded me of those kind of spooky stories that kids and teens tell, like around a campfire or at a sleepover. You know what I'm talking about? Just like spooky, scary, atmospheric stories, and this was definitely something that reminded me of that, and I did really enjoy the art, but in general, it just kind of lacked some kind of depth for me, and I just wanted more from this. I ended up rating it 3.5 out of 5 stars. If you want to read a quick, atmospheric horror comic book series that has pretty awesome art, I would check this one out. And the other comic that I read is Volume 4 of American Vampire. I am loving this comic book series still. Every volume I love because for some reason this just speaks to me. This takes place mostly in 1950s, which is, by the way, a great setting for this comic book series. I was kind of sad that we were done with the 50s because I definitely wanted more action in the 50s. This has some amazing action, by the way, and a really awesome car chase that just keeps going and going. Really enjoyed this, and it does give you some more background on the pre-Vampire Skinner suite, so that was pretty interesting. The only small issue that I had with this volume was the last section, and I did enjoy it, but it kind of felt a little bit disconnected from everything else. So even though it was interesting and I can tell that it's starting a new storyline is just didn't interest me as much as the rest of this volume, but overall, really loved it. 4.5 out of 5 stars. Cannot wait to read the next volume. Secretly wishing it was still in the 50s. And moving on to movies, November kind of started on a bit of a shaky ground because the first movie that I saw was Spectre, and I did do a full review of this on this channel. You could check it out, but if you haven't heard, Spectre didn't quite live up to people's expectations. I ended up giving it 3.5 out of 5 stars. I sincerely hope that Daniel Craig will be back for another Bond movie, because even though Spectre did a really good job wrapping things up, I still think they have ways to go. They didn't quite hit the mark with the villain this time around, and honestly, the opening sequence was my favorite part of the movie, which is kind of sad. After that, I saw Brooklyn starring Saoirse Ronan, and I loved that movie. I loved it so much that I actually went to see it the second time the other day, and I still loved it. I have some issues with the pacing in that film, but overall, it is a beautiful story about an Irish girl who moves to New York in search of better opportunities, and she has some tough decisions to make along the way, and she's homesick and all that. I do have a full review of this as well, so check it out, and also definitely check out the movie because it is awesome. Then I went to see Spotlight, which you may or may not have heard of, but it is a very well done film with an amazing cast. It has Michael Keaton, Mark Ruffalo, Stanley Tucci, Liev Schreiber, Rachel McAdams. It is a very, very well acted and well done film. This is a true story about a group of journalists from the Boston Globe who are investigating a priest or priests who allegedly molested a lot of kids, which is horrible. I almost wished I would have seen a documentary on this instead, because it's the kind of movie that does make you want to read up on what's going on and figure out what's true and what isn't, because you're watching this and you're like, is this actually what happened? Because that is some crazy shit. Something else that I really liked about Spotlight, aside from the performances and the fact that it is a very well-made movie in general, is that it doesn't really glamorize the profession of journalism. It feels very realistic. These people are just doing their job. They're not borderline superheroes, which is something that investigative journalists sometimes seem to appear like in movies. So it was very refreshing to see. I highly recommend checking this movie out. I would rate it 4.5 out of 5 stars. It's pretty near perfect. Then I ended up watching Knock Knock, which I was actually looking forward to because I do like Eli Roth, and I probably like him more as a person than as a director, which sounds like a terrible thing to say, but it's kind of true at this point. And it had Keanu Reeves in it, so I was intrigued by this movie, but it ended up being my least favorite movie of the year. I thought it was pretty bad, and by pretty bad I mean really bad. And I don't go out of my way to trash movies, you guys know this, but this was just so bad in my opinion. And I didn't just want my money back, I actually wanted my time back, like my life back for that hour and a half or 2 hours or however long that movie was. I don't really want to talk about the premise because just don't watch it. Just do yourself a favor. Anything is a better investment of your time and money. Like a latte at Starbucks is a better investment of your time and money than this movie. I'm sorry, sounds horrible, but I gave it 1 out of 5 stars. It's just no. Just don't watch it. After that, I watched Mockingjay Part 2, and that kind of turned out exactly as I expected it to be. And I do have a full review on this movie, so you should just check that out so I don't go on and on about it. But I ended up giving it 3.5 out of 5 stars. I thought it was pretty enjoyable. I thought it was definitely better than Mockingjay Part 1, but not quite as good as Catching Fire or The Hunger Games. And the last movie that I saw in November was Creed, and this is the 7th movie in the Rocky franchise. I really enjoyed the film. I thought it was really good. Ended up giving it 4 out of 5 stars, which created controversy for some reason because I didn't say it was the best movie of the year. Some people are really upset about this. It's kind of funny. Anyways, check out my review for this movie and my controversial opinions, apparently. And that's it for my November wrap-up. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know what you thought of these books, movies, and comics. If you've seen or read them, I would love to know what you think in the comments below. Let me know if you have seen anything that I haven't mentioned that was really, really good and I need to check it out, or if you've read something that I should read immediately. Let me know in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and also subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I hope you're having an awesome day, and I will see you very soon with my November haul. Bye!